So my dad was a huge influence on me, especially early on, and for so many reasons. And one of them was that, he encouraged me to do artwork. I didn't have, the resistance that a lot of kids, especially young kids, have as far as, being creative. And he showed me a lot of stuff. I mean, he would help me. He would show me how to use calligraphy pens, speedball, whatever it was, quill pens. I used to write with a quill. I just remembered that. Yeah, we would do that. He would actually get a feather and he would shave it down, and yeah, that was fun. And, so I was doing stuff like that. And I think, gosh, by the time I was, I don't know, 10 or 11, I had a piece in a show at Lever House in, oh God, I don't know if that's Park Avenue or Madison Avenue. I can't remember. But I was like a little kid, and it was a show about alphabets, done by kids. And somehow I got, I think I must have had a fast track into the curatorial process, with my dad being part of the ad world. And that was I think my first show was when I was about, I'm guessing 10 or 11. And it was all this, oddball alphabet stuff. So yeah, he was a huge influence. Oh, this is also good.
Yeah, that's great.
So when I was 12, I started studying at the Art Students League in Manhattan. My dad had studied at the Art Students League when he was, a young adult, or he was an adult. Anyway, I started studying there, and my dad used to drive me down to the league from the Bronx, and that was very highly prized time with my father, away from the rest of my family, and for him away from work. So that was great, and we would talk, and yeah, so he was a huge influence and very accepting of all my experiments, and he believed in that I should have classical training, which I did, and starting at the league, I was starting doing figure drawing when I was 12, which was a good introduction to the human body and, real art stuff. So I was the only kid in the Saturday morning figure drawing class drawing, and that was pretty amazing for a 12-year-old. Yeah, I was fortunate. I didn't have to fight to do any of that stuff. A lot of people, but that adversarial, those conditions, for some people, propel them to do their thing. I mean, I didn't have that. So that would have put me in maybe 6th grade, 7th grade, whatever. Yeah, it was fairly well established that I was one of the artists in the class. So that was, I was given a lot of praise for things like penmanship, oddly enough. I was the, example of how to write beautifully, even in 1st grade. Go figure, given what I had, grown up around. Practicing fancy scripts at 5. Yeah, it seems like writing, and writing as drawing, and drawing as writing, and all of that has been a thread that's gone through from the very beginning, from practically from when I could hold a crayon or a pencil or a quill, as the case was. And yeah, so let me think about that. I managed to blast through um, public school in New York City and went straight to Pratt. So I was 16 when I started Pratt. And I was lucky. I had some really great teachers there. And um, one of them, this was pretty interesting. One of them in my sophomore year, sophomore painting class, the reason I'm remembering him is that Ed Dugmore was one of the original abstract expressionists from the 50s and the 60s. I don't think he was like what was considered the first tier, but I think he was like the second wave, after after de Kooning and all the rest of them. And but he was around for that whole era, and he was a very important teacher to me. And his work, I wouldn't say that his work had a lot of writing per se, but the years that I was studying with him, he was incorporating a lot of linear stuff that suggested writing, and I was able to somehow mentally make the link of that. It wasn't the stuff that he was known for. He was a student of Clifford Still's, and so or a protege or a buddy of Still's, and but he was drifting off into some other experiments. So anyway, my years at Pratt were pretty good, and considering how young I was still pretty open, but also a little wary of getting too close to my teachers. I don't know, there was my rebellious side, and which was one of my few regrets, because I think they would have been a tremendous resource for understanding the artist's life. Not that I didn't pull a lot of that out from my experiences there. So to get back to your question about writing, because I know I just kind of drifted off there, I think it started, it's always been in there. No. There was another one of my instructors who was hugely influential. He was German. Dugmore and Joachim Seidel. I forgot about Seidel. Yeah, he killed himself in my senior year of college. Yeah, that was a big one. He was writing on his canvases. I mean, he was about as serious a German expressionist kind of guy as you would ever come across. I mean, he was the real deal, and a little scary, to be perfectly honest, but super influential on me. And he didn't put up with any. I remember, oh gosh, this is really funny because I don't think about this stuff. It's funny that I'm remembering some of this. And I remember in his class doing some writing things, but it was more like, it was the 60s. It was like 1967, 68 at that point. And I was doing kind of like psychedelic postery writing, things that you would see on Fillmore posters or stuff, as part of the artwork, and making it very organic and blah, blah, blah. And he says, yeah, great. Yeah, you can really do that stuff very well, but what, I want to see you bust out of that and start, expanding what you're doing. Don't get comfortable in that, So he was super influential. And his own work was very raw and dynamic. And when he felt like writing stuff, he would write it. And he had one piece called Forget Hell, which also was super influential, I mean, just that as a concept, because I think he had pretty much thrown out religion and, you know, probably more than that, and was just off and running in a wide open field of life. So I know I'm rambling. So you're going to have a lot of editing to do.
That's fascinating. No, that's great that you went there.
So Zeidel was he was very influential.
So you actually got to see writing being used in
Yeah,
art,
yeah.
and not just
And it
for
wasn't
its
pretty,
sake.
and it wasn't pretty, and it was like meaningful, and it wasn't you know, as an artifact. It was like an and the way he was writing was raw. There was a certain rawness and expressiveness that went along with the drawing and painting in the painting. So yeah, that was very influential. I was like 17-ish, 18, whatever I was at that time. So Doug Moore and Zeidel, or Zeidel, very influential. At some point, now I'm going to skip a few decades here, because at this point I'm out here, and I meet Roger Rubin, who is the premier graphologist in the country, in the United States. And graphology being the study of handwriting and handwriting analysis, which I was fascinated by. And that opened me up to a whole other, I mean, this is a side thing, but it's totally related to my artwork. So I went and started studying graphology. And that had a huge influence on me. Not so much in my work, exactly. It was one of those things that allowed me to have so much more compassion towards my fellow human beings. Because what's revealed in handwriting about people is fascinating. And a skilled graphologist can tell you a lot about a person without even having ever met them. And you know, there's a direct connection from the brain through the neurosystem down the arm, into the hand, into the pen, onto the paper. And it's totally revealing. The paper being a substitute for the world at large. And then how you place your writing, and how all these different elements. It's a totally fascinating study. But what I learned from that, as I looked at hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of handwriting samples from people all over the world, and you know, anything I could collect, because that was part of, you know, the study. You would find stuff and you would ask people to write you a letter and all this stuff. Everybody is basically fucked up. I mean, seriously. And it goes all the way back to early childhood or traumatic experiences, usually parents or whatever. And once I saw it graphically, and I knew what I was looking at, I'm going, oh my God, people are just crazy. People are really, or neurotic, if nothing else. If not out and out, you know, crazy. We're all neurotic. We've all got our quirks, and so that gave me a whole new perspective on interacting with people. and and seriously, a lot more compassion, which is a good thing in life. So, I was rummaging through some of my flat files yesterday, and I don't know if you can see this. This was an early piece, and early piece from about 20 years ago as far as this next wave of exploring writing and mark making in that way. And, I'll use all kinds of crazy stuff to make marks and, unorthodox ways of doing it. So I found this. I thought this was a pretty good experiment. And it looks like something ancient, to me. And things that have been, where the words have been worn away over time. And, so there's that implication. I forget what I think I was using press type to do this, right? You might remember press type. We're of a generation that press type existed. This is way pre-computers and, fancy fonts. This is another one from the same era, probably same day or two, actually. The whole thing about the creative process, as far as I'm concerned, is exploring. And, I was talking to some young people last week, 12, 13-year-olds, and they want to know what inspires me. Why, how do I keep going? Day after day doing this, because I told them I've been at it for, I'm going to be 68 in a couple of days. So it's been basically about 60 years of really knowing that this is what I was going to do and what I've been doing. So you have to have, and I was telling these kids that making stuff is secondary. It's like, yeah, artists make stuff, but it's actually secondary to being curious, to be inquisitive, to be experimental, to have your eyes wide open, your ears open, all the time, as much as possible, looking at things carefully, listening to things carefully, wondering about what makes things tick, what makes you tick, what makes people tick. All of that stuff are the principal components of being an artist. And the making comes out of what you're observing, what you're listening to, all that stuff. And, and to follow what you're interested in, whatever it is. And there's some good examples of just following stuff that I'll show you also down in the lower studio.
The dots?
Exactly, exactly. The whole thing of trying to make sense of our place in the world is what we're all doing, I think, whether you're an artist or you're not an artist. Artists seem to be obsessed with that to some degree. I mean, when you're not making pretty pictures or you're not, designing stuff or things like that, not that there's anything wrong with that, but, or being clever or being ironic or stuff like that. But when you're truly exploring, it's a deep way of life, or I wouldn't even say it's a deep way because you can't measure what's deep, but I would say it's a way of life. That's how you move through life, whether you're actually drawing or painting or not, if you're going through life with that kind of a mindset and that kind of awareness, it's a rich life. It's endless. I mean, I was encouraging these kids to put down their screens and get close to nature. Look really carefully at trees, at rocks, at everything as they're walking around. Spend time outdoors, really looking, getting close and examining the barks of trees or how rocks are formed, and anything you need to learn about color or form and structure and light and shadow and natural history. You can look at a stone, and if you're really willing to dive in there and explore, you can see layers of time, from just examining the lichen that's manifested on stones that you're looking at, or trees, or just all of it. And it gives you so much to contemplate, And then where do we fit in, And where do we fit in at this time? And then how much of the work that we're doing is reflective of right now in this time? Some people put a high value on that. Other people put a high value on timelessness, stuff that you can't necessarily pinpoint to a given time. It just seems to be a human expression, and that's why cave paintings are still so alive now, So there's that. I've got my dad on one side. He passed away like 25 years ago. So growing up, I had my dad as a shining example of creativity and extremely skillful and well developed as an artist. I mean, I'm, a shadow of what he was. And then on the other side, I got my son, who's he just turned 38. My son Sasha, and he's a pianist and musician. And in his world, he's amazing. I mean, so I'm kind of in the middle. I'm sort of the underachieving, least ambitious, and least developed of this three-generational configuration, Yeah, my son's brilliant. My dad was brilliant in his own right, and I'm somewhere in between, just muddling through. And they were both very successful, also. I mean, my son's making a living as a musician down in LA as a session player, and touring, and he's great. And my dad, my dad actually didn't make a living painting. I mean, he sold stuff sometimes, but that, he was making a living primarily as an art director. But he was highly skilled and valued in that capacity too. So yeah. Well, they're all based on nature. Even the writing stuff, it's all in there. It's all integrated, even if it doesn't look like trees or nature or things like that. It's not so much the oh gosh, I used to think it was very important to be like nature. I still think this, and by that I mean not that we go out, not that I would go out for walks and want to draw pictures of trees and landscapes, but to actually bring the energy of what nature is, you know, the rushing of a spring, or just the, you know, plants reaching for the sun, or, you know, the element of wind and moving branches or grass or whatever it is, and to bring that to the work. So that's, you know, when I think of nature, that's also part of it. Not so much just, you know, literally painting pictures of trees or landscapes. Not that there's anything wrong with that, to Seinfeld it up, but you know what I mean? I want to show you something. Something I also just pulled out of storage. I forgot it. I have so much work. I don't know. I have stuff I haven't seen, and I don't even know what I have, to be perfectly honest.
You also have a storage locker?
I have 3 of them.
3 storage lockers?
Yes, 3 storage rooms
Where are those?
all over the place. There's 2 in this building and 1 off-site in Santa Rosa,
Wow.
filled with stuff. Now, you're probably going to get a lot of reflection on this, are you? Okay. This was this must have been from, I'm thinking, the late 90s. And when it was at a time I started really fully going on, devoting myself to scribbling and writing. And this was an early piece. And I thought, you know, it still had the freshness and that exploratory thing. And it's all very spontaneous. This was not planned. I just did a whole bunch of them. And that's the other thing, you know, you do lots and lots of work, and you try not to be attached to it. And sometimes they'll be successful, sometimes they won't be. Sometimes, most of the time, you can't tell if they're successful or not. It takes a while to know that. But in retrospect, this one I thought was a unique piece that I just started scribbling, and at the end it says, "Try to forget," or I think that's what it was. Or maybe it started with that, "Try to forget," or something to that effect. I have no idea where that came from, but it seemed like it was just try to forget everything I've learned as in art school, and just start as a beginner again. Start, you know, Zen mind, beginner's mind, that whole thing. And be like a little kid again. So I think this was a really important piece in that respect.